feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside. He's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
You will call me Lord.
Lord Marchin, sorry. And I should have said you were like allergic to garlic or
Yeah.
something like that. How you doing, buddy?
Providence, Matt. Providence. I'm doing well. We're getting to the end of the year now, so we're cramming. It feels like an exam in a way. We're cramming to watch as much as we can. To go back to the movies maybe that we missed throughout the year. To be a part of that conversation,
Or to watch Knuckles and Sonic the Hedgehog again.
Sure, why not? To be a part of that conversation when it comes to year-end lists, awards conversations, all these topics of delight and intrigue, and what better way than to be sexually repressed and depraved and talk about Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, a passion project that he has been staking out since his high school days, and making play versions or theatrical adaptations for high school and college and things like that. So when it comes to Nosferatu, the vampire, there has been so many iterations on that story. It's almost like it's a fool's errand at this point, in terms of like, what can you do
that others have
that's different, or bring something new to the table, or what really fleshes out your stamp on it. And I think like those are questions that a lot of people will have going into it. But I think Robert Eggers might not be everyone's cup of tea. But I do think he has earned a certain amount of cachet and credibility after the three films he's made previously, with The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. This is the first film of his that doesn't have "the" in the title. So there's that.
Or The Vampire.
Yeah.
Yes, there is that. A movie he did reference to you when you interviewed him, like felt like a decade ago now.
Yeah. So when I interviewed him at which is also very funny, at Trump Tower for The Witch, inside of their bar. And this is like right as Trump starts, campaigning for president. And so the writing of where the location was changed. It was like, we're no longer, in the Trump Tower. We're in the bar that's like inside the Trump Tower. And so it was like literally a one camera situation where my editor Johnson Lai brought in Roger's equipment, and we set up, and it was Robert Eggers and Anya Taylor-Joy. And literally at the end of the conversation, I said to him, like, I was reading in an interview that you had like 5 to 6 movies that you always wanted to make, and one of them was Nosferatu. And I just asked him, what is your take on that going to be? Because we already have the F.W. Murnau film, the silent movie, where they couldn't get the rights to Bram Stoker's Dracula, so they kind of tweaked it to a certain degree so they wouldn't get sued when they were making that German movie. And then obviously, Bela Lugosi, in Dracula, and then that Spanish version that shot around the same time for Universal. And then, decades later, you get Werner Herzog's version with Klaus Kinski, Max Schreck being in the original silent era movie, and then Klaus Kinski playing the vampire, the Count Orlok in that case. And those two movies both are very distinct and stylish in their own ways, but also feel definitive for the narrative they're telling. And then also, you've gotten tons of bloodsucker films in between all of that, and then even up to now, you just saw Francis Ford Coppola's take on Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is, I think, another reference we'll probably mention throughout this conversation when it comes to the talk of the immortal beloved, or the romance of it all. And so there's always been a fascination with vampires in cinema, but the big daddy, of these things, and going back to what Robert Eggers said, he was like, oh, well, I have like my own specific flavor for it. And it's something like he got it. Like he knew, it's like, yeah, I totally understand when it comes to, that question where it's been done so many times before. And every time it has, you know, a filmmaker, or, you know, is at a time of like filmmaking kind of beginning and becoming cutting edge. So there are all those aspects of that into play. So what does Robert Eggers' Nosferatu look like in terms of, you know, distinguishing itself from the pack? And I would say on a technical level, it's probably the most exciting film that he's done in some ways when it comes to his collaboration with Jaron Blaschke, who is the cinematographer. I love the way that the camera moves within a shot, or follows somebody, or kind of does like, not necessarily like a full pan, but kind of almost moves with the character as they're moving out of the frame into the next shot. You know, if you see someone riding on horseback, and as they're riding on horseback, they're leaving the frame, they're leaving the shot, and just as they're out of the frame, the camera kind of does this quick kind of jolt, and it moves with them just as the camera's, you know, as the object is leaving the frame. So shots like that in this movie, I think are really well done. Or the obscuring of Count Orlok when we see Nicholas Hoult come in to the castle, and obviously, again, you know, you think of like Gary Oldman, and
Sure, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when Keanu Reeves comes to visit Gary Oldman's version of Dracula. But I love the way that you don't see him in close up at first. He's kind of blurred out into the sides, and we talked a lot about that um, with Longlegs, where a lot of that movie blurs out Cage's character until you need to see him.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the technical side of things, and I will preface. I know Eric already kind of went into his thoughts, but this movie comes out December 25th, Christmas Day. It is technically a Christmas movie, even
Yep.
watching it. We're not going to spoil it, even though, you know, as Eric so eloquently stated already, it's been done so many times. You've seen Dracula, you've seen Nosferatu at some point, probably in your life, or know the story. So there's not much to spoil, but we'll try to stay away from spoilers. If you don't want to know anything, you probably should bow out now. You kind of poked fun at me during your intro too of Robert Eggers not being someone's cup of tea, and he's one of those guys that is 0 for 4 for me personally. But I like the guy, and I think, like, objectively from a technical standpoint, he is a fantastic filmmaker. All 4 of his movies, technically, I think, should fucking rip. They should be something that is completely up my alley. It should be something that I love, and I can appreciate them from a technical standpoint. That being said, all 4 of those movies, and now I shouldn't have thought he was going to change, right? Like, I don't know why. I'm always interested in his movies. I'm always like, I want to see that. But then after watching Nosferatu, after not really, I was in the minority of not really enjoying The Witch. The Lighthouse, again, technically, I love the vibe and the look and the feel, but just the movie itself just didn't quite work for me. Northman, same thing from a technical standpoint, and this epic big feel and the production design and the cinematography and stuff like that is fantastic. Just didn't quite click with me. And watching Nosferatu, I'm watching it and I'm like, objectively, I know this is expertly crafted. Everything you mentioned with the cinematography, the production design, some of the shot composition, everything, the violence and the costume, and like everything is meticulously crafted. But I'm sitting there in all 4 of those movies, including this one, I just have no fucking reaction. Not to the style, not to anything. It's almost like I'm out of body looking at it going, I know this is well made, but there's something that doesn't quite click in any of those movies. And I was trying to talk to Nevis, my wife, about it, and she fell asleep watching it. So there's that. And which I don't think is the movie's fault, but I don't think any of his stuff has really worked for her either. But I just can't put my finger on why it doesn't work. But when I'm watching it, one, I have a hard time connecting with anything going on in his movies. I think one thing that's a me problem, the time periods he tackles, I just don't really have a strong interest in. So you're working overtime trying to, get me
Win you
invested
over.
in that story. Yeah, to win me over. Um, Two, I think his movies are a little self-serious to the point where like I kind of want them to be more, not saying that they need to be fun or anything like that, but there's something that takes themselves so seriously that I don't take it seriously. I don't know what, if that
I'm going to
kind of
push
makes
back
sense.
against that a
I
little
don't
bit
know,
because
man.
I think there's a sense of humor in all of his movies. I think he's
I mean,
serious
The
about
Lighthouse for sure.
I think he's serious about the craft. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
and I get that is
The
a
Lighthouse has a
complaint.
lot of that, I'll say. But
I think that is more direct, but I think there's a sense of humor in this movie too, where you have lines where, you know, I've seen things that Sir Isaac Newton would want to crawl back into his mother's
that's a
womb,
great line.
or even like the, you know, Ralph Ineson, who's becoming a regular in Robert Eggers movies, where, you know, he
Galactus
mentions
himself.
that Lily James's character, or not Lily James, Lily Rose Depp's character should wear a corset at night in order to, you know, keep posture and to hold back the hysteria. Like there's this
Sure.
weird sort of like self-deprecating, dry sense of humor that comes out in these movies. Even in The Northman, when you have the final fight sequence at the gates of hell and you see that title card come up and it does that kind of like
Sure.
kind of voice, like there is or even, you know, Black Phillip and like with Thou
Maybe
Love
the
to
humor
Live,
just doesn't.
Deliciously.
Yeah, you're right.
It's there, but
you're there. It
it's
just doesn't work for me.
acquired
And
taste.
that's kind of what I'm saying is like, I know I can't really even explain because I'm saying objectively very well made movies. It's just something with the characters or the story that just never quite clicks with me. And I had this exact same feeling watching Nosferatu, where it kind of just happened and I was apathetic to the entire thing. When I get to the end, and again, I just watched the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula a few weeks ago, which I think is having a lot of fun and is campy and but still tells a great story and is expertly crafted as well, just like this movie in a much different way, right? And I actually, the other thing that I actively really didn't, I thought Aaron Taylor Johnson was actually bad in this movie, like quite bad. And
It's
everyone else
Craven the Hunter you're
is
talking
yeah,
about.
everyone else, Skarsgård, fine. Hoult, I think Nicholas Hoult is okay in the movie. Lily Rose Depp is fine too. William Dafoe is always great, but you know, he's Willem Dafoe. Ralph Ineson's always great. He's Ralph Ineson. Aaron Taylor Johnson reminded me of Will Ferrell in Sherlock Holmes. Just like literally anytime he would start to yell like this. And like, I like Aaron Taylor Johnson, but
You do?
I kind of do.
What?
I liked him in the Tom Ford movie,
Nocturnal Animals?
where he wipes his butt. I don't know, man. Like this is a tough one where I'm like, I can't even really put my finger on it, but
You know what it is? I figured it out watching it. You know what? Like Nicholas Holt's also young, obviously, and he looks young. They both look young, but there's something about Aaron Taylor Johnson where especially with period piece stuff, especially when he's dressed up and, you know, and he's playing somebody that, you know, has two children, a wife, you know, real estate. He's the, you know, best friend of Nicholas Holt's character, who's kind of playing the John Harkness character in
sure.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. Because we should also mention that what this version of Nosferatu is doing is it's pulling in certain references not only from other versions of Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's also bringing in like there are certain choices within the lore of Dracula that are omitted or changed for this narrative. And so certain characters are also amalgamations of not just
Yeah.
simply, you know, like for example, Willem Dafoe. He's not just simply Van Helsing. He's a combination of Van Helsing, and I believe Robert Eggers mentioned that he's also supposed to represent the producer of the original silent Nosferatu. So, you know, he's kind of combining certain characters and putting them together in ways, and that's also I think what he's doing with some of the Dracula lore, because in this, with how the beast feeds is not through neck bites, it's through the chest, which makes it even more sexual and intimate in terms of how, you know, when you're watching.
I kind of like that close to the heart kind of thing.
I do too.
Yeah,
And it is also, you know, the sound of the drinking. I think is very disturbing
Oh, there were a
and
couple
visceral.
moments, dude, that I was like, "Oh, fuck," or like laughing
Yeah.
because they were disturbing or violent or
And I
something
think
like
you're
that.
supposed to
So,
laugh because again, like it's almost so absurd with how over the top it can be at times, especially even in some of the deaths,
yeah.
and how nobody is safe when it comes to this type of story. But going back to Aaron Taylor Johnson, he feels like a child. He always feels like he's a
Yeah.
kid wearing someone like his mom or dad's,
Suit or
suits
whatever,
or
yeah.
or costumes, and his delivery is awful as well. And I think the biggest problem with this movie in terms of what it's trying to convey is that the romanticism and the emotion doesn't pay off the way that the technical aspects do.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
exactly it.
when you're watching this movie, you are completely astonished by the work of the cinematography, the sound design, the performances even on a technical level. Like I think what Lily Rose Depp is doing in terms of her, sort of gyrating and doing this weird kind of performance art with her body, like it's to be commended because it is all in camera. You can tell like it is taking a toll on the body, but that's also like a
Mhm.
point of that character. It's a very physical performance, as though she's like this antenna for the supernatural, which I think is also an interesting component to that character, because usually in these types of stories, the romantic lead, the woman of the story, is usually sort of bait or fodder for the creature once he comes to sort of civilization, or reintegrates himself into society.
Mhm.
This is really her story, in the sense of her having these deep desires that she's afraid to talk about, whether it be repression, shame, ridicule. What is desire? What do you need to be satisfied? And you have Bill Skarsgård at one point even talking about himself, describing himself as an appetite. He's an appetite,
Mhm.
and he's her appetite, almost manifested in physical form.
Yeah, I mean, and Skarsgård obviously already you mentioned earlier too about in Long Legs, like revealing, the titular Long Legs in that film. And I think with a lot of creature features, monster movies, anything like that, um, I do have an issue when I liked everything when he's played in shadow, but then the more you reveal of Count Orlok and the more you see him and you're like, oh, he's just looking like a Viltrumite, this mustache dude.
I kind
Like
of like
that.
that.
I do like it, but it's not creepy to me anymore. It's just a dude, and I know that it doesn't necessarily have to be creepy. It can be creepy in different ways. His look doesn't necessarily need to be creepy. And I do like obviously playing with the shadows and that stuff too. Of I think all that stuff's done super super well. But the more I see of Count Orlok, the less I'm like, this is goofy looking motherfucker. Like this doesn't do anything for me. Like I don't know. Like as the movie goes on and the more you see of the monster, the less scary it becomes. I don't even think being scary is its first objective, but I think that's just other stuff that kind of takes me out. And again, going back to everything you're saying is like, yeah, every couple minutes I'm like either going, holy fuck, this looks really nice, but that wasn't enough to like carry me. And I guess because it's a story that has been done so many times, and even me who hasn't seen every iteration of Nosferatu. I've seen the silent one. I've seen a couple versions of Dracula. Dracula's been used in a million different things, most notably in the Goosebumps computer game played by
Jeff
Jeff
Goldblum.
Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum is Count
Topical.
Orlok.
Topical right now. Um, yeah, man. So I don't know. It's just one of those movies that completely evaporated from my brain, like almost right after seeing it, much like The Northman. The Lighthouse has stuck with me a little bit more, which hasn't. Um, I also find his attention to be this like fantastical realism thing of sometimes and I'm just an idiot, that's why too, is like I can't follow the dialogue, and that was a huge problem in The Witch, right? And then um and I think him wanting to be so authentic in how characters speak and speak to one another, I think is great. But on another hand, I'm watching it and it like his movies might take a second time to kind of fully grasp everything or the dialogue, and I think that's an issue I have, and I hate watching with subtitles. So this is also a me problem. Um, but I also think if a movie can't, if I have to watch it a second time to understand what the characters are saying to each other, and not saying that this movie has it is super complicated to follow when it comes to the dialogue, but I feel like that's something that's carried through his films as well, where I guess it's authentic in the way that they're speaking, but I'm like, I can't follow it all the time. So that's just me being a dum dum. But
No, I think that's
um,
fair because it also is, very much a part of like the aesthetic and the technical
mhm,
prowess that is on display, where the authenticity of being period specific to even the dialogue
yeah,
is challenging for audiences. Like I don't know every single line that is being said, but I get the gist of it because I've seen
same,
so
yeah,
many versions of Dracula that I know the beats that it's building towards in terms of the greater scheme of things, and so that helps quite a bit. It's just interesting to see where he pivots with certain characters or changes things, because like even Willem Dafoe doesn't enter this movie until much
hmm,
later in the film. And like, yeah, Willem Dafoe, and he'll always be great, and he's a lot of fun. But there is an aspect of like, oh, you think about him in the trailer, and you're thinking, oh, when's Willem Dafoe going to show up? And he's in the way kind of like Quint in Jaws, where with Jaws you're teased Quint, with this you're not. He's referenced at one point by Ralph Ineson in terms of, oh, I have a colleague that you know um might be able to help us with this, but his methods are unconventional. He's
yeah,
somebody that has gone off the deep end, going looking to supernatural sort of remedies when it comes to the world of being a physician. So I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of that, how that character is portrayed, because usually Van Helsing is this academic that has this thirst for violence, and
hmm,
here it just almost feels like he's just been eccentric for so long and extra ostracized from his community that he's kind of lost it. Plus he's smoking dope all the time, so
sure,
it's kind of added to it all. But it's just interesting when you look at even Ralph Ineson being in this movie, who he was also in The First Omen earlier this year. And a big part of that movie was looking at how, you know, it becomes very heightened in the last act, where you have the main character giving kind of a physically demanding performance that's referencing possession. And
yeah,
Lily Rose Depp, a lot of people are watching this and reevaluating her career, not just being a nepo baby, but this was a role that was originally intended for Anya Taylor-Joy when it was first in production. And Harry Styles was either going to be the Nicholas Hoult character or Aaron Taylor-Joy, or Aaron Taylor Johnson character. So I miss that Anya Taylor-Joy's not in this, just because I think Eggers gets the best out of
I
her
agree
in
with
terms
that
of
too. Yeah,
a presence and a performer. But I think what Lily Rose Depp is doing in terms of the dedication
and like
to
the
the
physical
craft
performance. Yeah,
is something that I get it. It's very showy. It's mechanical in its design, but it's also something that feels in the moment, and anything could happen. And it also just plays into that idea of this person that has almost a sixth sense, and has always had this connection to supernatural creatures or another world, and that she's this apparatus that is sort of the bridge between the two. um that is all interesting with that character and how that character is portrayed, because usually in those stories, or these stories, that character or that type, that archetype, is usually just a love interest,
and
or
that's it. Yeah,
you know um fodder for the beast, and a temptation. But here she has more agency and is built in a way that like I saw some people talking about it online, where the double bill of Baby Girl in this makes sense, because in Baby Girl you have a character that is finally starting to confront what she believes are dark thoughts and, the things that turn her on or the things that she likes, she's kind of repressing in herself and bottling them up instead of exploring them. And in the time that Nosferatu takes place, anything that wasn't proper or Christian is considered to be hedonistic or, demonic in some way. And to explore a woman's sexuality in the way that this movie does, they really go for it at times. And, and that R rating is definitely earned. And so that's to be commended, where, I think the thing it does lose though is, as cheesy as it is in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie, there is something about the romance, about not the romance, not like as in the romance between Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder, but the romance of the movie itself, the corniness of the movie, where you were talking about the melodrama. That's not here.
That's what I mean by the self-serious thing. And I know what you mean by some of the humor that's in there.
Well, there's the first shot that's also very funny, where you have the two, Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp are newlyweds, and their beds are separated. And then as they're talking, he's saying, "Oh, I have to go and do this thing." And then she's like, "No, like I want to continue, having sex and doing all this stuff." Like they're in the honeymoon phase of their romance. And then the cat jumps up right next to her. And that's also, a sight gag in terms of,
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get
so
that.
It's there.
Also, Nicholas Hoult can't be in Renfield and this movie within 2 years.
I agree with that, but it's the same thing though. You could argue that
I know, with
Willem Dafoe being in Shadow of the Vampire and playing Count Orlok in that might be distracting.
I agree completely. I'm half joking, right?
Yeah.
But you don't. It's like what you said earlier. You also have. There's no Renfield in this movie, but the character they replace.
Yeah, Simon McBurney is Renfield.
Is that Renfield? I'm confused.
Yeah, the guy that Simon McBurney who and that's interesting as well. We should,
because they never reference him as Renfield.
No, but he's an amalgamation of Renfield.
Yes, that's what I mean.
The way that Willem Dafoe is of Van Helsing.
It's a bunch of different characters, but it's essentially Renfield. That's what I mean. Yes, and I know that. So I got that part, but yeah, I mean, we'll wrap it up now. I think it's one of those movies where my opinion's not really going to matter to you unless you find yourself aligning with my tastes, or if you've agreed with me with Eggers' other stuff. I know, Eric, you really like Eggers, but with Lighthouse and this, you said more from the technical standpoint. I don't know if you've gone back and reevaluated Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, I think I like a little bit more. Here's the thing that I'm most disappointed with the film, The Bad Boys of Cinema 2024.
Oh God, we're having a rough year, dude.
I think because I wanted to love this movie in the way that he has been wanting to make this movie for his entire career. This is a passion project. Succumb to darkness, Matt. Come with me on this journey. I want to be there 100%.
Yeah.
I feel like he's every other movie I love, like I truly love. Like I think The Witch is incredible, and I think The Northman is amazing. The Lighthouse and Nosferatu are movies I want to love. I want to embrace the darkness. I want to be
That's like me with all four of them, dude.
By Bill Skarsgård.
Suck my heart, baby.
The mustache ride. Bring me to the mustache ride. I actually like the mustache because he looks like
I do too.
like a Cesar, like a
yes. Again, I don't dislike the look. I just don't think it's very creepy or scary. But
no, I don't either. But I just think it's because Max Schreck's version of Count Orlok is so iconic that no matter what you do moving forward, there's no way you can replicate that. Like even, I mean, like Bela Lugosi as well, obviously, like amazing, but there's just no way you can improve upon that. And so, him having the facial hair and even the haircut and but still elements of, this idea of this like small Romani community and them being aware of like what's going on. Like I loved all that stuff too, but there is a feeling where I was left a little bit cold by what I think the emotional sacrifice of the movie is and what we do for either love or the toll it takes on people. it just didn't click on that level. And I think that final shot, while brilliant in its composition and disturbing and kind of funny in terms of how you know, play with the lore,
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have meant so much more if I was invested in the humanity of those characters, and I never was with this. You know, I don't I'm starting to like Nicholas Hoult more, not just because of Juror Number 2. Like, I think his best perform I think he's the best when he's a dick. Like, The Favorite, he's
Yeah, you've
amazing
always
in.
said that. Yeah, you've always said that he's
He's
good at playing a little prick.
And there are moments in this where he is like, the whole point of Nosferatu is that you kind of do feel bad for Count Orlok, in the sense of, you have these sort of conniving characters trying to steal money from somebody who is in a quote unquote vulnerable state, you know.
Sure.
And it's also looking
Sell
at,
him this decrepit mansion.
yeah, taking advantage of somebody that's quote unquote a foreigner, someone that is elderly. And, you know, you're looking at, the story explores xenophobia. It looks at, you know, people in marginalized communities, the other. Even the Max Schreck thing, like, there was controversy when that movie came out, where it was, you know, accentuating the design and the look of the features, and turning the character into a Jewish caricature, or
Sure,
harmful
yeah.
stereotype. So that's always also been a built-in aspect of this story, where this time around it doesn't feel like that's completely like the main focus of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is really the story of Rose Depp's character, and her sort of awakening, you know, and facing her demons, quite literally, and also not feeling the shame for the things that she wants to indulge in the way probably that Robert Eggers feels like these are things that he likes to indulge in, and he doesn't want to feel that shame. But to your point before, I do think, in terms of the filmmaking, the dedication to authenticity, down to maybe the most minute detail that maybe we don't
Yeah.
even ever notice. Because I remember when
Totally.
Alexander Skarsgård was talking about The Northman, he was talking about, like, he had to wear the shoes that, you know, this era of Viking war, and it was like, no one will ever see the shoes he's wearing in these scenes, but Robert Eggers insisted
Yeah,
upon that.
I'm of two minds of it, right? Like, I appreciate that, but then sometimes roll my eyes at that and feel like, but there's a place for
Yeah.
both movies that take itself so seriously that everything needs to be period accurate. And there's things like, we're gonna record our Glicked review in a second, and I know some people have kind of, with Gladiator 2, there's a few historical inaccuracies there, and I always have loved Ridley Scott's approach of who fucking cares.
Yeah.
Like, and I think there's a middle ground there, or I think both are valid, of the who fucking cares, it's a movie, like, who gives a shit.
Or
Like,
you go the
or
the one extreme where it's either
yeah.
A Knight's Tale or Black Knight, and you just don't care at all.
Yeah, but then I kind of love that and appreciate that, right? Because it's a fucking movie. It's like, but then I do understand being like, no, I want this to feel like it's ripped straight from that era, and things like that, and everything is down, every detail is triple checked to be accurate. I just sometimes think it loses me in that sense, because I don't know. Yeah, he's a weird he's a weird one for me, where I still like the guy, like his vibe. I like the movies he's trying to, like, the things that he's tackling. Like, I like his trailers when they come out. His movies always interest me, and even though I've gone 0 for 4, I can always appreciate, from a technical level, what he's doing in each one of those movies. I think, even looking back on them, but um I think this might be a very subjective thing for me, where he's just a guy that just, for some reason, never quite works for me. So, unfortunately,
I wanted to ask you something though as well
yeah,
about
please, before we
the
wrap.
cinematography. This is one thing as well that I was kind of grappling with, because there are some very striking visuals throughout, but it also does look quite clean,
Mhm.
in terms of, it has this digital
Yeah.
presentation that I almost feel like it needed to be as dirty as sort of the situation as it escalates, in terms of the plague coming in, and, you know, people getting sick. Like, it looks from a lighting perspective, it almost looks too contemporary in some ways. Where you look at The Northman and The Lighthouse and The Witch, those films feel a little bit like they feel more time era appropriate, or they feel like a time capsule, where I felt like sometimes I was watching this and it would just maybe it was the screener links that, that we were watching them on, but it did
Yeah,
have a
I think that
very
can
clean look.
I think that can throw us off sometimes too of watching these things on screeners. I don't think it would have changed my opinion seeing it in a theater.
Well, it doesn't change the
Um
narrative itself, right?
no, and you know, we can still appreciate that it looks gorgeous at times, but I do agree with you that a more filmic look I think would have benefited from the movie. And even Northman I felt like yeah, it was down in the dirt with the characters and stuff like that, but even that kind of had a clean look to me from what I remember, but I really love the aesthetic in The Lighthouse. It's my favorite thing of that movie of the black and white, the mono you know, audio, kind of that kind of stuff. And, you know, and not every movie needs to fall into those gimmicks as well. I get that you're making a movie in 2024, so why not use the modern cameras and tech that you have? It doesn't always have to look and feel like uh it's ripped from that era, or you know, match that era, or have like an older looking vibe or a dirtier vibe or something like that. Like I get the idea, or someone going, it's like the James Cameron thing too, of just like, you know, we have the technology. I want it to, yes, it takes place in that era. The production design is going to be immaculate. Everything down to the socks that they wear are going to be period accurate, but I'm going to use the highest quality equipment and make it just look crisp and clean. So I think that's more of a personal subjective um, but I mean, it's all subjective, right? But I personally, yeah, I thought it objectively looked nice, but I would have liked an aesthetic closer to The Lighthouse. I'm not saying it has to be 4:3 in black and white or silent like the original Nosferatu or
Although
anything
that
like
I
that.
think would have added
Um,
something to it, because I mean, maybe you know, you want to separate yourself because you're making it now, and
yeah,
you're trying to, you know,
you're
create
asking, wanting
something,
to do something different, right?
yeah, its
So
own identity, but it
yeah,
is still referencing these things as well. And from a filmmaker that is so, you know, period um sort of obsessed in terms of what he's looking for in terms of the accuracy of the time, the modern technology that you're working with when it comes to the cameras, when it comes to the filmmaking, when it comes even to how you write a script, or you know, the actors you're casting, because some actors can feel more contemporary than
yeah,
others, you know, it does feel like there is compromise there, you
hmm,
know. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying for somebody that is so fastidious in their choices as a filmmaker, this does almost feel like maybe he took some of those compromises because he wanted to make this thing for so long, that I
yeah.
could see, like, if he truly had complete control and could make this movie anytime he wanted to, maybe he would have waited for like Anya Taylor-Joy to be available
Yeah.
again, or
Or
you know,
maybe
like,
he's making it more accessible a little bit, because like something like The Lighthouse
well, we talked
maybe
about this though
isn't.
with Steve McQueen's Blitz, right? Where this was the conversation we
Yeah,
had, where you have the art house filmmaker who has a, you know, visual background in sort of avant-garde artistry, coming in and applying his craft and his technique to narrative features, and every movie that he's made has kind of gotten him closer to something that's a little bit more commercial every time, you
yeah,
know, like from Hunger, which is probably the most abstract biopic
sure.
political film that you could make about the IRA and Bobby Sands, to, you know, to Blitz. It feels like you have a filmmaker that is grappling with, like, how can I still make something that is me in terms of who I am and my background and what I have to say about something, but then also how can I try to make this, as you said, more accessible, commercial to an audience, and especially with Robert Eggers, with The Northman also being Focus Features and Universal in Canada. You know, the A24 movies are smaller films; they can
Sure.
take the loss if they don't do well. but I think because you almost need to make your money back or break even or
I
whatever
mean, that's
that
movies
is.
in general, and that's the struggle of art via commerce, right? And
Yeah.
the whole struggle with movies in
The
general.
brutalist.
We love an art form that unfortunately can't survive without making money,
Yeah.
right? So it's this weird wrestling, and yeah, you can have studios like Focus Features or Searchlight or these sub labels from these big companies that can take bigger risks and maybe even lose money on a movie here and there, as long as it's not a complete bomb. And especially having the history with, you know, Universal Monsters and Dracula and stuff like that with Focus Features and Universal, I think is interesting too. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's some concessions there of would he have gone weirder? I mean, it's still very dark and weird and stuff like that for a big studio movie, even though Focus kind of teeters on that line between art house and mainstream
It's
stuff.
a
But
sub like Nicolas Holt's character
yeah,
is in this, a sub, a
sure.
cuck,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. And going back to the aesthetic thing of like maybe he made concessions here to make it a little bit more, you know, palatable for an audience going on Christmas Day or something like that, where you're getting a horror movie, but it's weird and dark, but it's a story you've seen a bazillion times. You know, movies recently, like I just watched September 5th the other day. Again, probably not from a, you know, not as objectively a worse movie than this. Maybe just from a thriller standpoint was enjoyable, but I did like the aesthetic of that movie, of the look and the sound, even though sometimes I'm like, is the sound, again, watching a screener, it might have just been the screener I was watching where I was like, is the sound supposed to sound like this, or is it just fucked up sound that I'm listening to? But I'm kind of into it because it sounds period accurate to with the camera and the cinematography and the filmic look and the washed out kind of look to it. And then you go to something like The Holdovers, that is pretty period accurate when it comes to the vibe and the look and the sound and the cinematography and the color grading
Even when it
and
cheats.
yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
also it
And
making a compromise in terms of like, okay, well, maybe we can't shoot this on film, but maybe we can make it look like it was shot on
I'm
film.
all for that. Like I as someone who is trying to work as an editor now and has an aesthetic that I like, or even if you look at that Matty Matheson video that I did was shot on iPhone and vertically and stuff like that, but you can kind of make something look a little bit, you know, like it was shot on a 16 millimeter camera or something like that. And I, I, I like that vibe, and I'm fine cheating that as well, to match an aesthetic. Like, of course, you'd rather everyone just shot on film, but I get that that's not going to be, you know, it's a pain in the ass. Not everyone's going to want to do that. But these are all just, you know, it's his movie, and whether that's compromise with focus or this was his pure vision, I don't know. But
Like I
um,
wonder how much it changed since he was
when you
you,
interviewed him that first time or
well,
something,
even
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 or even
before then, right?
before,
Because
yeah,
when you're a teenager or when you're a young man, you know, in your early 20s, there's a feeling of there's a stubbornness in that you will make the thing that is in your mind, and that there is
uncompromising,
no
yeah,
compromising. There's,
yeah,
you know, you are forthright in your ideas, and you know, you are going to be the one to make the thing. You're right, you're always right, you know, like there's that thinking
yeah.
as well. um and then that's going to be the film, and you're going to blow people away once that movie gets released, and people will be like, you know, I'm glad he stuck to his guns, I'm glad she stuck to her guns, like that kind of thing, you know. But as you get older and you're in the studio system, or you know, filmmaking in general, or the industry, I think you also begin to realize it's not as easy to do that. And if you want to work more frequently, or like every 2 to 3 years be shooting something, you have to give some room to do that. And even the bigger
Yeah.
names are having a difficult time getting certain things greenlit, because there was a period where, you know, you'd go into a studio meeting and they would talk to you for 20 minutes, and if they liked your pitch, they would greenlight it right there to make sure that you wouldn't go to another studio to pitch the project. And now it doesn't really work that way. It's all about, you know, like, uh, risk aversion, and trying to sell something on a brand or an IP, you know. And obviously, I think I like this movie more, and I'm not trying to force myself to like love the film, but I think I
Yeah.
do appreciate this movie more in terms of like the IP that we've gotten recently with Wicked, with Gladiator 2, with Moana 2, at least within the confines of the shadows of Nosferatu, it feels like it is trying to do something interesting with the tapestry,
doing its own thing based off
yeah,
of it instead of just being another thing.
and adding
With
to it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like adding to it and making it your own, where you could argue with Gladiator, more of the same legacy sequel, Wicked, straight adaptation of a stage play, pretty one-to-one for the most part. I know it's bloated in that sense. And then Moana, just again, being more of the same, but lesser. So you get that a lot. So taking this thing that you've also seen a million times, but trying to make it your own. Yeah, I can appreciate that. As well, even if it didn't completely work for me.
Because when you're too close to something as well, I think like that can also be a problem. Like when you love something too much or have spent too much time with something, you can't evaluate it in an objective way anymore in terms of your approach to it.
Sonic
right?
the Hedgehog for me. So it's just like
perfect example. But you know what I mean? Like when you love something for so long and you've been wanting to make it, and it's
I'm
like
a shit
you're too close
even from film criticism, dude. Like I'm a shit film critic sometimes because I'm getting myself further and further away from that, and I just love podcasting about movies with you, and I more and more, it's not these biases or biases, but like sometimes it is this subjective feeling, or you have this nostalgic or this nostalgia for something, and things like that. So ultimately, anyone who listens to us, I go, well, you just kind of have to, if it's your first time listening to us,
welcome to the suck zone.
Yeah, I know we're having a bad year, but I honestly try to be, fair. If you've liked Egger's previous 3 films, or even like Eric, like hit or miss, you might go either way. But if you've liked all 3, you're probably going to vibe with this. If you're more like me and they haven't worked, you probably don't even care, and you might not even be watching this. So it is what it is. It unfortunately didn't work for me. You're kind of more mixed positive. I think I'm mixed negative, mixed with a sprinkle of positive, but it just didn't quite click for me. However, again, one of those guys where whatever he does next, I will be interested in, which is weird, right? Like,
but then you'll ultimately be disappointed by the final product. I mean, I'm interested in what he's going to do next, because if it follows the pattern that's been going on, the next
it should be something you love.
It's going to be a banger. But I do really appreciate this movie. I love vampire films in general. All of these things are my jam. I'm a soldier of sicko cinema, so like, releasing this on Christmas feels blasphemous as well, which I kind of appreciate all of those things. I just wish that it's not a warm movie by any means, and it's not supposed to be, but I wish like I embraced the vampire the way that I embraced it with Werner Herzog's version, with the F.W. Murnau movie, with Coppola's film. It's just one of those things where it's like, I want to love this thing so much.
I want to love all 4 of the movies of
I want to take those bony fingers and just put those hands around this movie and hug it. And I still recommend it, and I still like it. It's just there's just a part of me that's like, okay, maybe if I cared more about the characters, that would just add something to it. And it's just like, it's just missing that one ingredient that brings it all together. And I think it's through the characters, because I just don't have any real connection to them other than knowing them from previous ones, to being like, oh, this is your version of Renfield, this is your version of Van Helsing, this is your version of Jonathan Harker. It's that kind of like interesting, the way that I think people like Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson have done in their movies as well. That's interesting. But in terms of like actually caring about what happens to them, or being disturbed by the outcome of the fate of characters, like that's a big problem, especially with horror movies. Like when you care about somebody and something bad happens to them, it makes it even more terrifying.
And unfortunately, this movie doesn't get to that point for you to care about them, and that's I think its biggest sin. Thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. I know we've been we've been the bad boys of cinema truly this year. And we're about to review God, 3 other films we didn't really enjoy either. So maybe we're just slowly becoming, that cliche contrarian
Well,
film
soon we'll
critic,
be like
each of
Count
us. Yeah.
Orlok in our own homes,
Yeah.
just kind of like rummaging around, waiting for somebody to like, scam us, but then we slowly drain them and then escape
Mm-hmm.
our confines. I do like that as well, like in terms of like creating a legal loophole in terms
Yeah.
of getting out of a situation, which is also, I think, very funny in terms of like, how does like a supernatural creature use
The legal
mortal
system.
law
Yeah. The legal system. Juror number 2.
Yeah, exactly. Nick Hoult, who is actually great in that movie. So
yeah, and it did make me think of The Curse of the Demeter again.
yes, because there is a sequence in this film that does take
and
place on the titular Demeter.
Same with Francis Ford Coppola's. Both times I'm like, oh, remember that shitty Demeter Dracula movie? Because I always forget that that's part of that story, but it's just like how he gets over to.
Yeah, well, it's just diary logs, because in Bram Stoker's Dracula, like it's literally like one section of the book, and it's not even like told in a first person perspective. It's all just like written diary entries of like what happened on the ship.
Every time he's on that fucking ship, I think of that movie, and I go, oof, that movie is. It's not Demeter bad, at least.
No. What's your Demeter rating?
Yeah, your rotten Demeter rating. All right, everyone. Please go check us out on Blue Sky. We're at untitledmoviepodcast.com. Yes, we changed our handle over there because you can just have your website as your handle over on Blue Sky. We're still over on Twitter. You can follow us on Letterboxd, which is untitled_movies. That's going to be getting a new year fresh restart where we will be updating Letterboxd more often as well, and keeping all of our reviews and up to date on there. And you can follow both Eric and I on Blue Sky. I'm at mattrohrbeck.com. Eric is at, you're not EM6211, you're at Eric Marchin.bluesky.
Yes. Blue Sky, there's no rules.
So anyways, we're over there. I'm spending more and more time over on Blue Sky. I think the vibes are a little bit nicer over there, even though we've been negative Nancy's, but I'm trying
less chaotic over there.
Yeah, I think more good conversations, what OG original Twitter felt like. So the vibes have been good over there. So we're also doing reviews for Glicked. So we're going to do a combo Gladiator 2 Wicked review that will be filled with spoilers on that movie. We also have a Moana 2 review that you guys can go listen to, as well as a Skeleton Crew, the first 3 episodes review. So it is a busy week for us. We're back. It's the end of the year. So we should have more. Little things like September 5th and
September 5th. They're not calling it September 5th.
I don't give a fuck. I'm calling it September 5th.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
September 5 sounds dumb, and I'm not saying it. So don't ever correct me ever again. I'm not saying September 5. It sounds stupid.
I know, but logistically speaking, it is September 5.
That's dumb. So September 5, as well as a couple other things I've seen. We'll probably talk about at a certain point, and also the Universal Studios episode I want to do, because I really enjoyed doing that Disney one as well. So we'll have a ton of stuff over the next couple of weeks. We'll try to spread these reviews out a little bit, but it is getting to that end of the year cramming, watching everything that comes out in November, December in like a short period of time. So we'll have a bunch of reviews and stuff. I rewatched Sonic 1 and 2, as well as watching the Knuckles series. So
you said that already on this episode.
I know. I just need to let people know. So
you're kind of you're balancing or counter programming Nosferatu within our review.
Yeah. So maybe we'll review Sonic 3, but that's getting close to Christmas, so that's a little trickier with those December 20th releases. But we're also seeing A Complete Unknown. We're seeing Mufasa in the next week or so. So we'll have a ton of reviews. So it should be exciting. So thank you again. And until next time.
Providence, Matt. Providence.